had carpools. When it was rainy, it was the only time that we were able to get a ride to and from school. Otherwise, we walked. And we walked like 3 miles, to school. But, and then we used to cut through the fences, and I remember my brother cut through the fences and there was cows herding out there, and he got a really bad barbed wire cut. My dad had to nurse it, But we had to walk to school and think there wasn't any other way up to get to school. It was about 3 miles, I would say, that on the way coming home, we would always, there used to be a black walnut tree. So we used to dally there. We used to get a rock and try to break the black walnuts and eat and we always had bobby pins in our hair. So we'd get our bobby pins and we'd crack them and get the black walnut meat out. And that was fun, and coming home from school. But we didn't have any kindergarten. We just had first grade and thing. But it was only a 2-room house, schoolhouse that we were at. It's called Edward Kelly School. It's on Bradshaw Road, and so that's where I grew up. And my teacher was Evelyn Fairburn, and she was a great teacher, but she was saddened that we had left, but she, when all the Japanese left, she didn't have a position because there were enough students, and so the other teacher took over from the 1st to the 8th grade. Yeah, and so.
So was your school segregated then? Can you talk about
No, because mostly there were Japanese that were at that school because we were all farmers, and the farmer children all had children. And quite a few children. And so, that's where we went to school, yeah. But, like one of the older people said that the teacher who was teaching the upper grades were really saddened. She didn't think this was right, that we were all going to internment camps, but it was one of those deals that we had to go. I mean, there was a ruling saying that, saying that we had to go. So
a teacher spoke out for you?
Yes.
Do you remember anybody else from the community speaking out on behalf of the Japanese?
I don't really know because, my dad said, if this was a rule, we had to go, we had to go. He wasn't going to fight it, And most of the people who went also said that it was, can't help it, but we have to go, so they all went. But, but they all lost, things on what they had on their farm, they lost their crops, whatever they had, and it was just what they were carrying. And, some people, so it was really, but, they wwere resilient. The older ones, the Issei's were, but gee, because, my dad came from Japan at the age of 15. And he went from Seattle all the way down to San Diego and worked crops, Well, first he went to the railroad, and he worked for the railroad up there in Seattle. But then after that, he went and did the crops, And so, and he was, he was 35 before he went back to Japan and got my mother, and married her, But, and my mother was only 20, so, my dad was an old man, in Japanese terms, but And so when I was born, he was 50. So, I mean, there were really a lot of years in between, but, But so, I mean, I really felt for my dad because my dad was always, I never knew him other than with gray hair. He always had a gray hair. And I thought, oh, he looks like a doctor, growing up, but we had a church across the street, and my dad took care of the church, but when we came back, it was arsoned.
And was this church mainly a Japanese church?
Yes, it was a mission church.
Can you talk about it in a full sentence and tell us a little bit about the church?
Oh, it was a Mayhew, it was a Baptist church, it was a mission church, and they had ministers and a missionary that came from Sacramento because we were way out by Mather Air Force Base, which is now just Mather, which they call. And, it was, my dad took care of the property, and then the boys used to play baseball right next to it. And then it used to be a cow pasture. And so they used the cow patties as baseball bases, And so it was, but all the Japanese were always, playing baseball across the street from where we lived because that's where the diamond was. And so there was a lot of different teams that came from Florida. And I don't remember where else, but but we'd go out there and we'd root for them, and so, and then the church would be right there across the street. So that's where I grew up. We went to Pinedale before we went to Poston, and then I remember going on the train up to there, and it's north of Fresno, and that's where we were. I hear that there is a plaque there now that you can see, which was Pinedale. But then from there we went to Arizona, and I remember getting on the train and going there, and I said, and they all peeked out, and they said, oh, the sun is coming up. And they went out and they said, oh, it's hot and dusty, in Parker. That's where the train stopped. And then we got on trucks and we went to Poston 2. And Poston 2 was, everybody grabbed a hanky or something. And because it was so dusty, it was a dust bowl. I see the dust bowl that happens in Phoenix, and I thought, oh, that's how it was, It was really dusty. I've never seen it so dusty. And then we went into our barracks, and there were the spaces on the floor. The woods were not right next to each other, and so dust was coming up from the floor, and it was horrible.
So tell us a little bit about your living quarters.
Oh, our living quarters was a room, but I remember we had cots, and so what my parents did was my dad, I don't know where he got the wood, but he made shelves and he so that we could store things, and then they put up sheets so that it could be a little bit private, for all of us. But that's how it was living. But the floor was horrible. Oh gosh! Every time the wind blew, it came off the floor. So it was not very pleasant. We had a neighbor that was living in, we were at 229 and they were in 208. So that would be on the other end of this barrack, of rows of barracks, And so what I would do is I would walk from 229 to 208 to my neighbor's place. And so they said, I was always there, at their house and thing. But she says, oh, it would be so hot. But then here comes Gladys walking by and walking to there. But I mean, I miss them because they were our neighbors, and they were, the mother was nice, and the children were, and one of them is my sister-in-law. So, so it was, but I miss them. I really did. So when we came back to Sacramento, which was near Mather, we didn't have a home, so we lived in our neighbor's house. And my brother had asked the neighbors, please don't come back because we don't have a home, and we just had the farm and we just had the pump house, which would be the electricity, And so they hurried and they had to go up to Beale Air Force Base because they were going to end that Air Force Base. And so from there, they brought the lumber back and they built the house. But it was real simple. It was like a barrack. But at least it was livable. We were able to live, and in it. So that's how, we got a home. And then so they were coming back. But when we were living in our neighbor's home, they had a sink. But with the sink, they only had it propped up with 2x4s. Whoever that lived in it had taken everything else, And so it was really pathetic in that house because there was nothing except that sink with the 2x4s, two of them, holding it up, so. And they figured it was arson because it was right after they said that the Japanese could come back to the West Coast again. And so they figured that it was arson because it had stood all this time, but when that act said that, that the Japanese could all come back, then it was thing. So we figured that it had to be arson because it was standing there all this time, but it was sad because a lot of the church people had stored their goods there, as we did not have our things there. We had them at the, which was Jim Fairbairn's. He had a big dance hall, and a lot of people stored their things there, and we had stored ours there because he was our, we rented from them. So they had the farm, and we, stored our things there. But a lot of the church families, they lost everything because, what we could store, we stored, but the rest of them, a lot of people just had photos and things like that. They lost it all, So really, some people say, gee, we don't have anything of the past, and things like that. So it was really sad, that they didn't have anything. You have to put things in the back of your mind, Sometimes, you see things like you want to go to the restaurant and you see no Japs, and that hurt, and when we came back, I know, my brothers and things, my brother couldn't find jobs, so at least they were farming, so, at least they were able to survive that way. But, and my brother went to school, to adult education, because he couldn't go to school, with 5-mile restriction before we were going into camp. And so he couldn't go to school. So then, he couldn't graduate. So then he came back and he went to adult education because he decided he needed an education. And so from there, he went to carpentry school, he went to You know, it was people hired him, and then he got his contractor's license, and he was a builder. And he did a lot of building at Poston, which is the place where we were interned. And he was part of the head of the construction of that. But he had a lot of helps, you know, from people who were interned there. And so, you know, but I mean, you know, I mean, some of it you just don't want to talk about it because a lot of people said, "Oh, you weren't thinking, you're just telling a story." And you know, I said, you know, I mean, if you were in that shoes, I said, it would be altogether different. You know, the government did.
So can you tell us a little bit about the water situation on the reservation?
Yeah, because there wasn't any water, and they put the water through, and so in one of the incidents is that we had a swimming hole, and my brother says it was not a swimming pool, it was a swimming hole. It was where they kind of stored the water, and so as it went through, and so that's where people went swimming at the camp, you know, and I almost drowned in it. And so, because I went there early and I was not supposed to be there because one of our friends' father was a lifeguard, and he went and threw me a life preserver, and that's how I got. So here I am live today. So I have to be grateful for the fact that I'm alive, because I almost drowned. I didn't know that we were in well, I mean, most of the places were arid places, most of the places that we were sent to was very dry and arid. So, I mean, I didn't know we were on an Indian reservation. I had no idea that. I mean, I knew it, you know, afterwards because they said that, you know, when we had reunions here in Sacramento, the group came from Arizona saying that they were really grateful for the fact that we had gotten interned there, because that's how they got their water and that's how they were able to survive much easier. You know, the different tribes were, yeah. So I mean, you know, and the Japanese were very productive too. They made little ponds and gardens and things like that, and you know, so yeah.